You're watching a More Beautiful World podcast with Susan Renee, a channel for those of you with open minds and courageous hearts who are looking for guidance on your trauma healing and personal transformation journeys. Here, I share with you the powers of intentional plant medicine use, along with other holistic therapies and spiritual guidance to guide you on your path forward. I'm so eager to share with you what I've learned in working with these sacred plant medicines on my own journey, including the knowing that what we do to heal ourselves, we do to heal the whole collective. Join me as I share my experiences, knowledge, and wisdom to guide your trauma healing so you can transform your life, and so that together we can create the more beautiful world we all know is possible. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of A More Beautiful World. In today's episode, I am going to share with you my third retreat experience with one of the more commonly known psychedelic plant medicines, ayahuasca. In part 2 of this series today, I'm going to take you through my 2 nights of ceremony and what I experienced while I was in the medicine. I had some powerful experiences during these 2 nights and definitely feel I received the healing that I was seeking. Along with my experience, I'll be sharing with you some messages and divine guidance that came through, and hopefully it can become medicine for you as well. So if you are ready to learn more about a medicine ceremony with ayahuasca, maybe you are curious about a medicine journey, or you want to know more about what an experience looks and feels like in this medicine, then this episode is for you. First off, as I have done in my recent medicine journey pods, I am dedicating this episode to my dear brother Parker, who recently left his human body and transitioned to the other side. Were it not for Parker, this episode and my experience and healing in this ayahuasca retreat would not have been possible. With that, these episodes are for you, Parker, para el bien de todos. And as always on my medicine shares, I have a quick disclaimer for you all. I am only here to share my experience with this medicine. And before we dive in too deep here today, I want to make a disclaimer. I do not assume any liability for the application of this information contained in the podcast. I am presenting this information and my experience solely to further the quest for a fuller understanding of the human experience and how I believe we can use these medicines to make this a more beautiful world for us all. With that, I am not recommending you go out and use this medicine without deep thought and deep consideration, ensuring that it is in alignment with where you are at on your journey. Remember, tribe, what we do for one, we do for all. And it is always my intention in sharing these experiences that the medicine I received and the downloads and the messages that I received reach you in divine timing and help to guide you on your own journey, just as they have done for me. And with that, let's dive in. Hopefully you listened to part 1 of the series to really understand what transpired in my ceremony preparation. As I mentioned in part 1, the moment you say yes to ceremony, that is when the work begins. So just in case you're jumping ahead and diving into part 2, the biggest thing to note from part 1 is that I was really coming into the ceremony with some PTSD being triggered and some deep grief as my friend Parker had just passed. And it was really pulling in a lot of PTSD, a lot of deep-seated emotions. And honestly, I was feeling a bit nervous about what was going to unfold in this ceremony, because I felt like I was in a pretty weak and vulnerable energetic space going in. So one other thing I did not mention in part 1 is that this ceremony was a bit of a new experience for me because one of my dearest sisters was actually joining me and sitting in ceremony with me. And up until this point, I'd actually never sat in a medicine space, in a medicine ceremony with anyone that I knew. And it was also her first journey, with one of the big hitters in psychedelic plant medicine. So I was like a little extra nervous for her and what her experience was going to be like. So not only was I going through my own process, I had this like addition of my friend being there, taking her to her first ceremony and not knowing what the experience was going to be like to have her in the room or what she was going to go through. So that was also part of the ceremony preparation. But here we go. Let's dive into ceremony night 1 on my technically third retreat experience and fifth night with the psychedelic plant medicine ayahuasca. As I mentioned in the previous episode, it really was my intention in this ceremony to simply let go of what no longer served me and tune into the vibrations of success, peace, and prosperity. I also had the intention to really let go of this grief and this pain and the PTSD that I was being plagued with the recent loss of my friend, and was really hoping to receive some healing for all of that. So, as I've noted in previous medicine podcasts, in the ceremonies I sit in, they, through the night, offer 3 cups of medicine. So you have 3 times to go up and take the medicine. So, a ceremony starts off and you take a cup, and then a couple hours later, you get offered a second cup. A couple hours later, you get offered a third cup. And that kind of takes you in the medicine through the night. Now, I am very sensitive to these medicines, and on this night, I started off with a half cup. And it was really fascinating because normally the medicine hits me pretty hard and pretty fast. And I barely felt a thing. And I was sure like a half cup was going to be quite a big dose for myself. And I just remember, like the medicine, I almost felt like I guess I was resisting it. And I was wondering, am I afraid? And that fear is making me resist the medicine because I knew, it could maybe be a difficult journey with everything that I was going through. So I kept asking my body to surrender, just like surrender to the medicine, surrender to the medicine. And it was also very quiet in the room, which if you have sat in an ayahuasca journey before, or maybe you haven't, usually it gets a bit noisy. You have your Icaros, the medicine songs going on, but usually you're hearing people purge and move around and burp, and like there's like all these uncomfortable like, purging type noises. And it was very quiet in the room, and I felt like there wasn't a lot of energy moving around. So really didn't feel like it was just me. And so anyway, I decided I was just going to meditate and enjoy the quiet and the stillness. There did seem to be, I was right by the door, and there seemed to be a lot of people kind of getting up and going outside, which did feel a little disruptive at times. But ultimately, I didn't really have much of an experience in feeling the medicine with my first cup. So as we were all really getting ready and preparing for second cup, something very unusual happened. And I feel it's worth noting because I'm a big believer in animal totems. So I'll preface that with this little story of what happened. So we're getting ready for second cup, and one of the guardians, whose name is David, we will be talking a little bit more about David in these next episodes, but ultimately he was up at the altar looking for something, and I saw him kind of like looking at the altar, which was just kind of weird. Normally you're not like up at the altar and kind of like fishing around. And I immediately knew what it was. And of course, it was a scorpion. And within moments, like the ayahuasqueros and the other guardians, like all kind of just jumped in to like capture this scorpion who had come into our ceremony space, who was like crawling around on the altar. And if you've ever tried to find a scorpion in a dark room, first of all, they move really fast. So in a lighted room, it's hard to catch them. And everyone was kind of like scrambling, and they ended up having to turn the lights on, which is like really a no-no in ceremony. So it was quite disruptive to a lot of people's experiences, and you could just feel like the fear moving around the room. A lot of people, I mean, I lived in Phoenix for 15 years and dealt with a lot of scorpions. So I wasn't as afraid as maybe some people were, but you could really feel that fear moving around the room. And for myself, I just surrendered to the experience. I was like, if I'm supposed to get a scorpion sting and that's part of my experience here today, like, I guess that was meant to be. Well, so of like 5 people chasing this scorpion, they thought it went under a rug, and they like sealed the rug down with some tape, and they thought that was just going to be the end of it. Well, then our guardian, David, they get ready for a second cup, lights go back down. David goes outside and takes some of the purge buckets outside with him, and he felt something on his neck. And it was the scorpion. So, like, luckily, he has really beautiful energy and is really good at like communicating with the animals. And I feel, he was very fortunate because he gracefully got the scorpion off of his neck, placed him back into nature where he belonged. And I just remember, when he had shared with us that happened when he came back inside, I remember feeling like that scorpion knew, he was going to be kept safe, and he was going to be able to get back home if he hitched a ride out with David. So that was really fascinating. And, I'll say a little bit more in a while about the scorpion and the presence there. I am astrologically a Scorpio, and Scorpios are all about deep transformation. And kind of like death and rebirth cycles, and really, being kind of comfortable in the darkness and moving through the darkness. It was kind of cool that the scorpion came in as an animal totem. But then after all of that rigmarole, it was time for second cup. So again, I really wasn't feeling the medicine. And when I went up to the ayahuasca, I was like, look, I'm not really feeling anything. Like, let's go for another half cup, which normally I don't take that much medicine. So, but I really wanted to make sure that I was going to have an experience and get the healing that I wanted. So I take second cup. I remember I went outside and just kind of grounded a little bit, and just tried to kind of like connect my energy back into the earth. I go back inside, get back into my seat. The music's playing. It's really beautiful. And very soon after I settled back into my seat and on my mat, I completely blasted off into the astral realms with intense visualizations, and it was just the wildest ride. It was probably the most intense visual experience I've ever had, being in the medicine with ayahuasca. So there was a lot of blackness, and I just remember a lot of like fragmenting, like almost like dimensions kind of splitting. But one of the visuals I remember the most, in all of this blackness and this like rainbow sacred geometry that was coming in, there was this huge black cobra that appeared, and his features, and the way I could tell like it was a cobra, like his features were all rainbow and like in these sacred geometry patterns. And he was like really big and just really present, in my vision. And I asked, like, because I wasn't afraid, and I asked, like, do I need to be afraid? Because it's a big freaking snake, like just appearing, right? And I was told, no, you don't have to be afraid, and I'm here to help you with your work. And it's very interesting because I've worked and had a lot of visions with snakes, especially in my psilocybin ceremonies. And so, looking up the snake animal totem, there's a lot to be said about snakes, but they also carry a very transformational energy. They can represent like the shedding, of the old self, and like growing a new skin, a death and rebirth cycle. And they can show up in your life during a period of transition to really support and facilitate your growth. So it's pretty fascinating to me because in our physical world, I'm actually a bit frightened of snakes. When I see them, I'm the one who stays away and just kind of like, thank you, snake, but I'm going to go over here. But in my medicine journeys, I've actually never been afraid of them. They've shown up many times and I've never had fear around that. So, just kind of an interesting note that was one of the big visual experiences that I had. So after the visualizations died down a bit, I started having this vision of my friend who was in ceremony with me of her at the time 7-month-old baby, and his little sweet energy was with me. I had just met him actually that morning, and just had a really beautiful experience with him and meeting him and just his precious little energy. And he came into ceremony and I was just like really feeling his loving little innocent energy. And it started this whole process of me like questioning, like I remember he was like, look at how cute I am. Don't you want one of me? And I was like, oh gosh, like, do I really want kids? Like I'm now 37. Well, actually I was about to be 37 years old at the time of ceremony. And it brought up all these feelings of like, do I really want to have kids? Do I really desire them? And is this something I do need to maybe make a priority in my life while I still have childbearing years? And his little energy kind of gave me a little more courage to open into that possibility, which was really fascinating. And I'll tell you how that came back in when I do my next medicine journey podcast. But in this night, again, I really tuned into the music on this first night. And the guardian that I mentioned, David, I was really connected into his singing and his guitar playing. And I just really was feeling the music. There was another female guardian there, and she has such a beautiful voice, and her songs were really flooding me with like peace and love as well. And then I had an experience with one of the ayahuasqueros. He was playing the Native American flute, and it was a song that was a little more, had a little more like melancholy type energy to it. And all of the music I was really feeling, and just seeing how it was influencing my emotions. But when that like more melancholic song was playing with the Native American flute, I was weeping, and I felt a lot of grief and sadness come up. And I really felt Parker, my friend who had just passed. I felt his presence there, and I felt a lot of the grief and sadness like coming up through that music, which was really a beautiful experience, very healing to have that be a part of your journey. So, still, up until this point, I have not done any purging in the sense of puking, vomiting, shitting my ass out like some people do with ayahuasca. My purging continues to be mostly tears and yawns and what I have now lovingly referred to as the shaky shakes. Um, Definitely some noticeable and prominent shaking in my body, which again, there are many different ways to purge. We all purge differently. And even like when I say tears and yawns, it's not like I'm crying the whole ceremony. It's just I'm yawning and tears are purging out my eyes, and then the shaky shakes come in, and literally it's like I can't control my body. And most of the time the shaking is happening like in my legs and in my butt and like in my hips. I did notice this time a bit of shaking in my arms, which was really fascinating too. So in this first night, I really did feel the presence of my friend Parker. And, he was there giving me some messages, reminding me I have all the essentials to do this work. I have all the essentials to, be on my healing and transformation journey. And I really connected into him when I did go outside before third cup, and I smoked a little bit of mapacho, which is sacred tobacco. And I was under the stars and just really feeling Parker, remembering our time together at Wachuma retreat, where we were smoking some mapacho in that that medicine. And of course, I was feeling into him and just really feeling his presence. I'm looking up at the stars, smoking this mapacho, and this shooting star just like goes across the sky. It was so beautiful. I'm so grateful to know that even after he transitioned from this world, his energy was still there with me. So this brings us to the third cup on the first night. And I took another half cup of the medicine, which I don't know. I guess I was feeling pretty brave because, again, that's a lot of medicine for me in one night. But I was really feeling good and I wanted to just continue my journey. Um, in this ceremony with this group of healers and ayahuasqueros, they do what's called a healing mat in the middle of the room by the altar, where you can go and lay out and receive some healing from one of the medicine one of the medicine men there. And anyway, I wasn't really feeling called to it that night. And I kind of checked in because I knew I needed to go on the healing mat, but I was kind of told second night it was going to be my turn to go. So after third cup, I just really went back to my own mat and was very deep in my own space. And I was feeling really meditative and was kind of going through this oscillation of feelings between like peace and calm and comfort, and then over to little brief moments of the grief coming out. I ended up going on this journey where my brain like was not stopping that night. And I felt like I couldn't get enough gratitude out into the world, which was a fascinating experience. I remember I was like, oh, I'm so grateful for, my friends, for my family, for my extended family, for all the people I've met along the way, for all the people who've helped me on my journey. And like, I remember I felt like I couldn't be grateful enough. And like the gratitude would never end and I'd never be able to get enough gratitude out into the world. And then this message came in of like, it's okay. Like we feel your gratitude, and gratitude is infinite. And there is always enough. There's infinite amounts of gratitude. And so it made me laugh a little bit because my mind was like running away and kind of freaking out that there wasn't enough gratitude. And then I got the message, there's infinite gratitude. There is abundance of gratitude out there. So that helped my mind slow down. And I also remember kind of at the same time, I was working to like send healing out into my entire body. And I was really working to like recode my DNA while I was in the medicine. And I was saying things to myself like, I am healing my cardiovascular system. I am healing my endocrine system. I'm healing my skin. I'm healing my gut. I'm healing my arm, all the things that needed healing. And I remember I asked grandmother during that time to download this healing into my DNA and into my cells, because I felt like I was experiencing so much during this journey. And I was like, I'm not going to be able to remember all of this. I'm not going to be able to capture all of this. And so I just asked her, because you can talk to the medicine, you can ask for things. And I asked her to just download all the information into my cells for me so I didn't have to remember it, which was really beautiful. So at the end, of this first night, I was really excited to dance and move the medicine around my body. And toward the end of ceremony, they always call us up to dance, and we can get out, from our mat. We've been sitting all night, and they play a few songs. And I remembered in previous ceremonies how my physical body was going through so much healing and it was so heavy, I couldn't move and I couldn't dance. So I would just kind of like stay there and, maybe bob my head a little bit on my mat. So when I got up and I was able to dance and like move the medicine, all the folks who were like still on the ground, I was making sure to just enjoy the dancing and enjoy the music a little bit extra for them, in case they weren't able to get up. So with the late launch of this medicine and not really starting to feel it and feel into ceremony until after second cup, as we had finished ceremony that night, we sing our prayers to close out ceremony. I was still really deep in the medicine. Like, I was not ready to leave ceremony room. I was not ready to go eat. I ended up staying in the ceremony room. I enjoyed more music. Up at the altar, one of our ayahuasqueros and our guardian David was there, still playing music. And I was so grateful to just like be feeling the medicine and to be having like a longer extended ceremony time is what it felt like. And I had so much love and so much gratitude in my heart, and was just really in this space of appreciating all the healing I felt and knew that I was receiving. So after probably an additional hour or so there, when I finally felt like I could make it to the kitchen, I went to the kitchen for some light food before bed. The chia pudding and the fruit always taste amazing as you're coming out of ceremony, but normally the soup tastes really amazing too. And for some reason that night I went to have the soup and it just did not taste good to me. And my best girlfriend was there and she's watching me, and I go to take a bite of the soup and I made like the ugliest, like most repulsive face because I don't know what it was about that soup, but it just did not agree with my tongue. So her and I had a really good laugh about that because normally I'm all about the soup after ceremony, but not that night. It wasn't my night for soup. So the next day, we wake up and we have group breakfast. We go into sharing circle, and there's always a lot that comes up in sharing circle. But a few things I really felt called to share with you in this episode is one of our guardians there asked us to really reflect on the presence of the scorpion that showed up and how did it really make you feel, and what showed up in your ceremony when that scorpion arrived. And again, I reflected back and was like, I really surrendered to the fear in that moment and just surrendered to the experience. And it made me really grateful that I've done so much work around surrendering to fear and being able to just kind of allow, and surrender and accept what is. I also feel like, again, animal totems are amazing, and scorpions do bring some massive transformation and like death and rebirth energy. So I felt like that was certainly a part of what was going on, for me in my experience as well. So a beautiful thing that came up in our sharing circle that I just feel like is good medicine for you all is the fact that pain is the teacher. Because pain is information, right? So a lot of times in these journeys, pain comes up and shows up, and even in our normal day-to-day lives, pain can be present. And so I was reminded that day that pain is a teacher because pain is information. And ask yourself, are you listening to the pain or are you ignoring it? I feel a lot of us out there are ignoring our pain and stuffing it down, which does not heal it. And so I was reminded again by one of these guardians who's been working with the medicine for 25 plus years that pain demands to be heard and pain needs love. And pain really comes from a lack of love. So you can use pain as your guidepost to really take you where you really want to go. And you can use it and give it love and really serve yourself first. So that really resonated with me. So I wanted to share it with you all. After we did our sharing circle, we also did a workshop in the middle of the day, which was a prayer workshop. And it was super helpful for me and really came into play during my integration when I got, I really entered into a deeper level of prayer work for myself based on this workshop. So I'm going to be turning the prayer workshop into a podcast for you all so you can learn more about empowering your prayers. So more to come on that. But so we don't go too long in this podcast for you all, I want to take you into my second night of ceremony. So I was a little more emboldened starting off the second night because the medicine had taken so long to come on. The first night, I decided to do a little more than a half cup to get started with the night. And again, when you start off in these ceremonies, you're in the darkness, you're listening to the Icaros, you're kind of like calling the medicine in and calling the protection in. And it's a time to really just be on your mat and like be in your own space. And there was a lot of people, even though the ayahuasqueros asked folks to stay seated and stay in their seats while we're in the darkness, moving through these Icaros. There was a lot of people still getting up and they were moving around and they were like walking outside. And I was getting really annoyed by people. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe they're not listening. Like they were told not to do that. And I realized, as part of my experience and beginning journey of the second night, how I still have work to do to release judgment of others. And I really started recognizing how we're all just a bunch of like patterns and belief systems running around. We've been all conditioned in certain ways. And I saw how conditioned I have been to be a rule follower, and to listen to, right, listen to your elders and listen to the teacher, right? And I was like judging all these people as like rule breakers, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you didn't listen and you must be a rule breaker. So it was fascinating to just see how judgment affects us and how it can be a bit detrimental and how really there's no need for judgment. Right. So that was a beautiful little lesson and blessing to come in. Again, a lot during this time, a lot of my purging, same as the night before, lots of yawning, lots of tears. Still so blessed that I don't get into intense, purging through puking or shitting. So thank you, grandmother, for that. But the medicine hit me really hard before second cup. So it was kind of a little bit slower onset, not as slow as the first night, but I was really feeling a lot of heaviness in my body and I was feeling some pretty good visualizations. But I was in good spirits. Like I was feeling strong, like energetically strong, but it was a little bit wobbly, physically. So it was time for second cup and I kind of had to muster up like some like physical strength to like get up and actually go up to the altar to get the second cup. And so I go up and take the medicine. And as soon as I did, I noticed that the healing mat was open. And I asked myself, is it my time to be on the healing mat? I didn't really know if I needed it. Because I felt like I was in a good place, but it was open and I kind of like locked eyes a little bit with our medicine man that worked the healing mat. And I could feel like he was ready to receive me to do some work. And I knew that I had things to process that I really wasn't able to access myself. So it was time to go and lay down like on this mat, on the ground by the altar. And again, it was hard for me to actually get to the mat because the medicine was coming on quite strong. I had a lot of fractals and visualizations occurring, at this time. And when I finally like made it to the mat, it was a little difficult to actually lay down. I was like really enjoying being upwards and I wasn't sure how I was going to do laying down. But as soon as I was able to lay down, and once I did, I saw the medicine man's hands like energetically like become a part of me and like go inside of me. And it felt like he was starting to do what I can only liken in words to some sort of astral surgery. Like his hands became all of this amazing sacred geometry and like connected into my body that was now in this beautiful like sacred geometry. And I could feel him like flowing into me. And I felt him specifically like connect into my heart and my throat chakra. And it was a really overwhelming and powerful experience. And I recall being guided, just surrender, 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 and like allow this astral surgery to take place. So as I'm hearing like surrender, surrender, I called in Parker, and my angels and my spirit guides to really be there with me for this healing. And I asked Parker specifically to help me open to receive the healing that I knew I so desperately needed. Parker was instrumental in my Wachuma ceremony to help me open my heart, and really to receive love and to receive healing. And I knew I needed that. So I called him in, and I could really feel, things starting to kind of open, and I could feel some of the grief and the shame, coming out. A lot of it I could feel, coming out of my lungs and coming out of my throat. And then all of the sudden, I feel Parker's presence there. I feel this like deep medicine work happening. And all of a sudden it was like this deep opening, like this chasm just opened up inside of me. And all of a sudden I felt all of the emotions start to pour out of me, and they just started to release, and I cried and wept. And it was almost this like deep moaning cry. It was really kind of like sweet and beautiful in a way, but it was like really deep, and like I don't cry like that. It was almost otherworldly, and it was a totally different experience. Like whatever this chasm of grief was that was moving out of me, and the cry that was coming out of me. Again, it was really beautiful, though also didn't even feel like me. It was wild. But as I was like crying and like purging out, this sadness and this grief and this shame and like all of these heavy emotions that were coming out, our female guardian was playing, and she was singing her beautiful, with her beautiful voice and playing the guitar so wonderfully. And I really felt connected to her music, and like it was almost like my soundtrack for moving all of this grief and this sadness and this pain. And then all of a sudden, I felt like Storm from X-Men, and like I felt like this lightning just like shoot out of me, like all of the emotions of grief and sadness just all of a sudden like shot out of me and went into like some of our strongest sitters of the medicine in the room, like some of our guardians, one of the ayahuasqueros. And all of a sudden, in like an instant, everyone started purging for me. And they were all purging by way of puking, which is just interesting because I don't normally purge that way. But they all purged that way for me. And I could feel this connection and like this lightning bolt energy connect from me to them. I had my best girlfriend there. She was kind of off on her mat by my feet. She was purging for me. Another one of my dear sisters, who's a guardian, in the ceremony, she was purging for me. And it was just this huge, powerful wave of grief that I just like shot out into the room, and others had to help me clear it. And I remember, I felt really powerful, and it felt like a really cathartic release, though I felt almost guilty that they were having to purge for me. I was crying and doing my own purging, but I knew I needed that level of help to move the level of grief and pain that I needed to clear. And I kept saying, in my head, like, thank you. I'm so sorry. Like, thank you for helping me. Please forgive me. I'm so sorry, because there was some serious purging that they were doing. One of the ayahuasqueros was off to my right, and he had a massive, massive purge for me. And it's really fascinating when you're in these spaces, how connected you all are and how you do help each other out like this. And so I was so grateful for everyone's help in that process. And because it was so intense, there was a part of me that just like really wanted to shut down, really wanted to stop the crying, wanted to stop this purging, this clearing. And, I got into this like space briefly where I was like, I've had enough time on the healing mat. It's someone else's turn. Like, don't be greedy. And then I reminded myself, like, I deserve this, and I am allowed to have this time of healing. And when it's time for someone else to go, like, they'll tell me, like, my time is done. And during that like cycle, as I'm on the healing mat, this message came in that I can have both this and that. And what it meant is I can be a healer and I can be strong and I can help others. And I also can be soft and I can receive help and receive healing from others when I need to. So I also knew in that moment I needed to receive this healing if I really wanted to keep being of service to others and not feel so exhausted. I've talked in a few episodes about the importance of opening up to receive, and it has been a lot of my work over this last year. So that message came in very strongly during the healing session. So after the intense experience of this grief moving through my body and clearing out of me and moving through the room and everyone purging for me, I was finally able to calm back down and really find some centered, peaceful energy and some comfort. And I finished my time on the healing mat. And I headed back to my own personal mat in the corner of the room. And from there, I was in a pretty peaceful place. Like I felt a little exhausted, but I did feel like it was a cathartic release. I felt alleviated from my time on the healing mat. And I was really just enjoying music, and some of the visuals still continued until third cup. And I went up for a third cup, did a little less than a half cup. And I went back to my mat, and all of a sudden I started feeling really tired. Usually in ceremony, I really do my best to stay awake, to stay upright. So I'm not tuning out any experience, but I slouched down a little bit and allowed myself to almost get to a laying position. I just felt like my body needed it, and I fell asleep. So honestly, don't know exactly when I fell asleep. I know it was after third cup, and I really don't know how long I was out for, but when I did come back into my body, I felt like I was having a bufo reactivation, which was super intense. It was really disorienting coming back in my body. I knew I had gone somewhere really far away. And as I came back into my body, I noticed I was super hot and I was covered in sweat. Like my clothes were wet, my hair was wet. And I felt like this was another big purge. Sweating is also a way to purge. And I felt like it was probably connected to the healing mat and some of the grief and shame that I was releasing, but I was just completely soaked. And I remember I was just wiping an incredible amount of sweat off of my neck and my face and my chest. And as I'm coming into my body and recognizing I'm hot and I'm sweaty and I'm kind of pulling some blankets off of me, everyone in the room was up and dancing in a circle and holding hands. But the song that they were singing and dancing to felt really dark and really demonic to me. And I don't know, it was as if I had been reborn into some darkness or another realm. I was really disoriented. And so I just kind of sat up and was trying to kind of gently sway and move back and forth and kind of move a little bit of energy, come back into my body. But luckily, once that song ended, I came back to a better place, didn't feel that deep darkness, didn't feel the demonic energy anymore. And I was still really deep in the medicine. Both of these nights were just very powerful journeys for me. And so we finished ceremony that night, singing our prayers, which I love as part of ceremony. And I was really feeling, as we were finishing up ceremony, I was really feeling into all the children. There are a lot of parents in the room, and they were all sending out prayers for their children. And I just felt really connected to the prayers for the children, of the participants in the room, and really for this next generation of children that are coming on this planet right now. And just a lot of prayers for them to have a healthy and abundant planet was really present in my heart as we were closing out ceremony. And so again, after ceremony closed, I stayed, because I was still deep in the medicine, stayed by the altar, listened to more music, and really could just continue to feel the medicine moving through me, continued to be in joy, to be in gratitude, and had a lot of extra gratitude that night for the healing mat and the big purge of energy that I went through. So after all of that wrapped up, and the music was done and everyone, had finally kind of left the room. I was one of the last people to leave ceremony room. I made it to the kitchen where I actually enjoyed soup the next night. Enjoyed a lot of soup. And then I was just so ready for some sleep. Like I was just tired that night. Which when you stay up late and you only get a couple hours of sleep a night, you get tired during ceremony. So those were our 2 nights of ceremony. And the last thing that I want to mention, I'm not sure exactly when it came in over the ceremony nights, but one of the last things I want to mention about this weekend retreat in ceremony is that I actually saw myself going back into another retreat in December, which was actually less than 8 weeks away. And I was a bit confused by that because I have never been called back to the medicine so quickly. And like, I've never been in a retreat experience and medicine journey weekend already getting called to another ceremony or another journey. So I was a bit puzzled as to why I was being called back to ceremony so quickly. And we'll talk more about that when I tell you what transpired in integration. But in the moment, I just leaned into trust and accepted this, that if it was meant to work out, it would. And, I was reminded of a conversation I had with Parker, and I said, how do I deepen my work as a medicine woman, and how do I learn to work with these plants? And he said, you sit with the medicine and you let the plants guide you. So since he was a big part of my journey that weekend and he was very present with me, when I saw myself coming back into ceremony, just several weeks after this one, I just leaned into his words of, you asked to be a medicine woman. And if you want to work with these plants, you got to sit with the medicine. So more to come on that, when we talk integration, but that is in the next episode. And today, that is all I have for part 2 of this series of my nights in the medicine. Do make sure you stay tuned for the next episode and the final part of this series, where I will be sharing my experience during the following days, weeks in integration, which is where I believe the true work begins and the magic really unfolds. The integration definitely started for me the very next day while I, was still in retreat, still having the medicine move through my body. And it has been quite the journey since that ceremony and really throughout all of the integration process. And I am so eager to share it with you all. So stay tuned for next episode. But as always, tribe, let's remember this is all about making the world a more beautiful place. And that begins with you. Because as you better yourself and you move through your healing and your transformation, you are beautifying our world. I hope you found this episode helpful. I hope you got some divine messages and maybe some medicine from my medicine journey. And I always appreciate you just being on your healing journey with me. As always, if any of you need support on your journey as you're healing the anxiety, the trauma, or in preparation for working through some anxiety and trauma on your own plant medicine journey, make sure you grab your free clarity call with me below so we can talk about it. I would be so honored to guide you on your healing and transformation journeys. But that is all for today, my dear tribe. Until next time, much love to you all. Hey tribe, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button below and then click subscribe so you catch future episodes. And remember, I've got lots of free resources for you to learn about the powers of intentional plant medicine use in order to support your trauma healing and personal transformation journey. So make sure you check them out in the description below and help in making this a more beautiful world for us all. Thanks again for tuning in, tribe. And until next time, much love to you all.